Silo on a Wednesday feels strange, right? So much so that I didn't even notice that the episode had been released and I was waiting until Friday. But anyway, I finally gave the episode a watch and I think it was definitely the best episode of the season so far. With the first episode being solely focused in Silo 17 and centered around Jules' survival from going out to clean, and the second episode being centered around the mood changing within Silo 18 following Jules leaving. Episode 3 gave us the viewpoint from both silos, and we finally got to see the strange man in the vault stepping foot outside of it, whilst we gained a bit more of an understanding of just how long ago the rebellion happened. With there being a lot to take away from this episode, let's delve into it and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is Silo Season 2 Episode 3 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. What happened in Silo 17? The state that Silo 17 is in is the very outcome of what could occur within Silo 18 if Jules doesn't get back there and show herself to the people. We found out in this episode that the man in the vault was called Solo, and he named himself that because he'd spent the most part of his life on his own locked inside of the vault. He mentioned that there was once an individual called Ron Tucker within that silo that went out to clean. However, he did the exact same thing that Jules did and he refused to do so. Instead, writing the word lies on the camera and eventually walking over the hill, which made everybody believe that he was alive. This was the very thing that led to the word lies being written over the screen in the cafeteria. There was also graffiti that was around the silo which said Ron Tucker lives, just like how JL was being painted in Silo 18. This showed us that the very rebellion that occurred in Silo 17 because people believed that Ron was alive could be what's on the horizon for Silo 18 because Jules did those exact things. This is why Jules' mood changed after she heard the story from Solo, because it meant that she would feel responsible for the death of 10,000 people if they followed suit, which she felt like they all would. The fact that the Order predicts what will happen and how to deal with it, it shows that people mirror similar behaviors across all silos. We also found out in this episode as well that there were 50 other silos that were in the vicinity of Silo 17, and that 15, 16 and 18 were the closest. Jules needed Solo's help getting underwater so that she could create a suit to be able to go outside and make it back to Silo 18, but he was refusing to leave the vault and saying that he couldn't. Solo couldn't because he was ordered by Russell several years ago, who was the head of IT at the time, to never let anybody inside of the vault. The turning point for Solo and Jules came though when Jules looked at the wall opposite Solo, and the words "we will get in sooner or later" were written directly opposite his field of view with the small window that he had. This connected to the dead bodies that were outside of the vault that were fresher when compared to the rest of the silo. This insinuated that the very people that Solo had encountered in the past had a hostile tone and weren't as polite as what Jules had been. This is why Solo probably ended up killing them, and why he has severe trust issues. He was refusing to go outside of the vault because he couldn't trust what Jules would do to him, as the only people that he'd encountered post everybody leaving the silo weren't as friendly. The fact that the statement was written directly opposite him was also something that was done to torment him and get inside of his already fragile mind. He'd clearly been on his own for a long time, and once Jules realized that he was just scared of her and couldn't trust her, it took her walking away from him for him to eventually leave the vault and chase after her. I believe this was because he'd essentially grown to actually enjoy some kind of interaction, and the very idea of being alone again was something that I don't think he could face. Right at the end, he said that he hadn't been out that far in a long while whilst he was on the bridge, and was shocked at what he was looking at. So I think we're probably going to be seeing the pair working together in order to help Jules get back to Silo 18. Solo has a vast amount of knowledge of what occurred in Silo 17, and he's been there for a very long time. We know that it's been a while because Bernard mentioned to Judge Meadows that Silo 17 had been in that state since before he made her his shadow. So there's a lot of history for Solo to tell. History that can also be applied to Silo 18. Who is Solo? There are a couple of different theories around who Solo could be, but let's take a look at what we currently know about him. When we take a look at what we know about Solo, it was said that he was Russell's shadow back when the silo was united, and Russell was once the head of IT, the very person that the sheriff wanted to take in alive but accidentally killed during the rebellion. We also know that he witnessed the people going outside when they decided to leave. This could be because he actually walked outside with them and then came back when he realized that things weren't going as the population planned, and then he could have locked himself inside of the vault. Or it could be because he was following orders and he could have been viewing it all from inside of the vault, which we know has a screen inside, so he may well have been watching it all unfold from the safety of the vault. He said that it was a nice day on the day that they all went outside, so he may have felt the outside, or again, it could have been because he was viewing it on a screen. The behavior that he has is very childlike, but that could just be because he hasn't really encountered anybody in a long while. At first, I did think that he could have been the sheriff's son, but I just don't think the timelines would work that way. The bodies that were right in front of him was something that he also didn't really address, most likely because he's probably ashamed of what he had to do. But for him, it was a kill or be killed situation, so it made sense as to why he did it. Solo must have been a lot younger when he locked himself inside of the vault due to the sheer amount of time that had passed. But with nobody around, he took being locked in there in a real literal sense. The fact that he knew of birds and other things of the outside world, it showed that he was an intelligent person, and the people that were sent to Silo 17 to kill him clearly wanted him out of the picture because of the information that he knew. He also knew that the suits that were designed for cleaning weren't designed to go outside, so I feel he definitely knows some dark secrets within the silo. Bernard and Judge Meadows. Bernard and Judge Meadows have a really interesting dynamic in this season of the show. Judge Meadows has essentially made peace with the fact that she wants to die and be out of the silo. This was telling for a number of different reasons. The first was that she said to Paul that the syndrome was a natural human reaction to an unnatural situation. She mentioned how humans weren't designed to live underground and be in the conditions that they were in. The second was that she was watching a home video of the outside world, families being together and looking like they were enjoying life, all whilst she was alone and had a tear going down her face, essentially mourning a life that she never had, showing us that she was done with the life that she was living. And the third was the fact that she thought that Bernard was somebody that she could trust, but she no longer could as he'd been lying to her in every breath that he took. She asked him several times if Jules said that she wanted to go outside, and he lied to her every time and said that she did. Plus, she also offered him counsel in stating that he should go against what the orders said he should do in the event of somebody not cleaning and a rebellion looking like it was on the horizon, and he ignored her. He decided to act with force and blame the people in Mechanical, despite the fact that they were the most hostile and that was where Jules came from, something which is going to backfire massively. Judge Meadows got a suit measured to go outside, and it feels like she's willing to accept her fate of dying if that's what's meant to be. But I feel like Bernard is going to set her up for failure. He's in charge of the suit, the tape, and I think the suit is either going to malfunction or the tape is going to be the version that isn't that effective and she'll die before she makes it over the hill. He said that he'd turn off the screen in the cafeteria in order for her to do so on the sly, but with the two-faced nature that Bernard has, he might well use Judge Meadows' death as a way of getting the people of the silo back on his side and show that Jules was an anomaly and the chances of her being alive out there are slim, which might well put the hostile tone to bed. I don't think that will stop the people in Mechanical from rising up though, because they'll probably continue to believe that Juliette lives. Cooper's death in this episode is something that will now also bring together the divided Mechanical, as the brute force and killing of him by Reggie almost implies that there's something to hide. Pete has turned. Pete was always a character that followed the rules of the silo, so much so that Jules believed that he ratted out her mother when she was a flamekeeper, but we obviously found out that he didn't. With Jules being treated the way that she was in the silo and being forced to go out to clean just at the point where their relationship was getting back on track, he's almost lost his purpose and feels as though he's wasted part of his life supporting a silo that doesn't believe or care for the people that it houses. With everything that's going on in the silo at the moment, a Code Silo Orange was announced to the medical professionals to basically make the people believe that their implant was being removed so they could try for children. However, they weren't actually removing them, just like what we saw with Allison in Season 1. The silo announced a lottery because they wanted to give people a sense of hope in this time of struggle and uncertainty, but it was never going to be fulfilled. It was essentially done to try and calm down the hostility that was present. Pete going against the silo's orders and actually removing Phoebe's implant shows that he's now lost faith and is most likely going to be on the side of the rebellion moving forward. Paul's change of mind. Another character that got a change of heart and mind in this episode was Paul. Paul was always doubting the legitimacy over Sims' story about what happened before Jules was sent outside to clean. But the fifth raider, Jen, somebody that he was actually friendly with, confirmed his doubts when she didn't back up the other four. Paul was exposed to something greater than the silo in season 1 of the show when he saw the book that had been passed down by the many different Flamekeepers, and ever since then, doubt had been growing. With him also finding out that Cooper was killed and brute force being the very thing that was being delivered to the people of Mechanical, I think we're going to see him going against Bernard. Judge Meadows also said how the life that they were living wasn't one that was designed for humans, and that it was probably the reason that he had the syndrome. So that was another thing that was inside of his head that was probably festering and causing him to change his mind. He's probably going to mirror the behavior of the sheriff from Silo 17 and take part in the rebellion when it does eventually arrive. My review of the episode. I thought this was a really good episode of the show. I feel it was the best one of the season so far. I like the fact that we got to spend time within Silo 17 and also Silo 18. Both stories developed well, and I feel like it allowed them to feel connected in several different ways. In terms of the performances, I thought Solo absolutely stole it. Considering for the most part of the episode, all we saw was his eyes and only heard his voice, it was really impressive. The character was delivered so convincingly, and you could sense the fear and lack of trust that was within his voice. Meadows and Bernard's dynamic in this season is one that I'm definitely finding interesting to follow. There's a chemistry that's quite hard to explain, but it definitely feels like Bernard is going to betray the very person that he's making out like he cares a lot about. The overall tone of people doubting Bernard and whether or not they should stay inside of the silo is something that's spreading like wildfire throughout Silo 18. Even Shirley and Knox put their differences aside in this episode following Cooper's death, and I didn't think they'd end up making up. Meadows has turned, Shirley has turned, Paul has turned, and Pete has turned. The very lifeblood of the silo and representatives from all walks of life are doubting if they should be there and its leadership, and it only means that death is on the horizon. Jules needs to get back, and I'm questioning if she's going to make it back in time before things go incredibly south. With the next episode being focused on Jules looking to find the materials to make a suit, and Solo hopefully helping her, will she make it back to Silo 18 in time? I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. So, there you have it, Silo Season 2 Episode 3 Ending Explained.